Throughout the year, there were many influential news stories that affected almost every person living in the US and the world. Some examples are Trump's controversial relations with Russia, the many school shootings that affected gun laws and violence, or the hashtag #MeToo movement and women's rights movements. In your opinion, what do you think was the most influential news event that happened this year?
The shooting in Florida,
Why do you think this was so influential?
because it made everyone aware of the dangers when someone can have a gun out of school and brought us everyone together.
There were also many exciting events that took place this year, such as the Super Bowl, the eclipse, or local news such as the varsity boys soccer team going undefeated. The news story that I can remember from this year is probably the tragic Vegas shooting that turned out to be one of the most tragic shootings of all time. I remember this because it killed so many and it was on the news for months after it happened. What is the earliest news story you can remember that happened this year?
The Las Vegas shooting, because it was so tragic.
And why do you think you remember this event?
Because of all the people that died, and it just like the Florida shooting, not awareness of what can happen, and just it was really sad.
Out of the US, there were many news stories such as the French elections, the Winter Olympics, or the tragedy in Barcelona. This year, there were many good and many bad events that took place in the world. Thus, one can choose whether the world went in a positive or negative direction this year. Do you think the world went in a positive direction or a negative direction this year, and what events do you have to prove this?
I think it went in a positive direction because of what Trump did with Syria, stopping them from using chemical warfare against the civilians.
So it seems certainly in the United States, there's a lot of things that aren't going particularly well. There have been a number of shootings, including the big one in Parkland. There's a lot of controversy about whether or not the gun laws that we have are strict enough, or whether or not politicians are doing enough to deal with the gun violence that we have in this country, much of it driven by concerns that the NRA funds too many politicians. So there's that going on at home. There's also Trump's protectionist policies, imposing things like tariffs and starting, essentially trade wars with other parts of the world like China and now Europe. That seems, if history is any indication, that's not going to end very well. There's also some issues going on in the rest of the world. A lot of countries in Europe moving in a populist direction with anti-immigrant policies, people being very kind of anti-elitist, anti-establishment, anti-liberal, with the rise of things like Nazism and bad things like that. That's all happening at the same time. So generally speaking, it seems like we're not better off than we were even 12 months ago, but certainly not 4 to 6 years ago.